Joining me today is the original frontman and founding member of UB40, Ali Campbell, who is heading to Australia for the fifth time in 7 years. I think it is in 8 years, um, for the Big Love Australia tour in January of next year. It's a run of 6 shows, and joining me today is the one and only Ali Campbell. How are you, Ali?
I'm good. How's everybody out there?
So, as I mentioned, 5 visits since 2017. There's a certain love for this country, and what makes the connection with Australia so special?
Um, I think we've always gone down great there, ever since we've been coming to Australia since we started, in 1980. Um, so we've watched all the major cities growing, like Melbourne and Perth, we've watched them, literally watched them grow. Um, and the fans have grown with us. We get like three generations of fans come to the shows now. We've been going that long. So it's always lovely to get back to Australia, Australasia, to New Zealand as well. And we also play the South Pacific, Fiji and Samoa and Tonga and all those places. So it's always also we get away from the British winter, which is always a bonus.
Absolutely. And you've just finished a handful of shows in South America. How were those shows?
They were great. We were selling out. We sold out in Chile. We played to 20,000 people in Peru. So, and we were in Argentina and Buenos Aires, yeah. So we had a great time, as always.
Now, do you find that now, 45 years into your career, you're playing to bigger crowds than you were through the 80s and 90s?
Oh, totally. Um, it's like I said, the crowds have grown with us. And we're very lucky in as much as we've got a worldwide fan base. A lot of bands just concentrate on one area, whereas we've always been traveling around the world since the 1980s. So everywhere we go, more or less the same reaction. The people that come to our shows, they come because they love reggae and they like UB40. So we're not self-indulgent. We do a greatest hits set, really. So anyone that comes to the show will know all of the numbers. There's no, we don't do new stuff that people won't know. We play, the big hits that we had many of. We had 40 top 20 hits back in the 80s and 90s.
And that's absolutely astounding. I mean, when you look at that decade between 83 and 93, you guys were unstoppable. You're one of the biggest bands in the world. I mean, the success of Labour of Love and Promises and Lies, is there one of those two albums that's become a personal favorite for a particular reason or not?
Well, Promises and Lies was an original album. I mean, we only did three covers albums. It was a trilogy, Labour of Love 1, 2, and 3. But they sold very well, and we had a lot of hits from them. But in that period, that the CD age, we sold 100 million, CDs. So, like you said, we were one of the most successful bands, in the world. Um, and it continues. People still love reggae. It's not so much as they love UB40 as people love reggae. And it's a great unifying sort of music. It's a dance music. And if you look at the influence that reggae's had on contemporary dance music, it's
Oh,
it's massive.
mm.
Nothing would exist without reggae, really. Hip hop, comes from dub, all your sort of drum and bass and all of the different genres that the different types of production all come from reggae production, the a dub basically. So I think that's why we do well, because people that don't necessarily love reggae, but they love drum and bass, will come to our shows and enjoy them.
Mm. There's a little bit of something for everybody in there too. And I mean, that sort of brings me back to your voice on top of reggae music. I mean, for me, you have, and please don't take this the wrong way, but you have a bit of a crooner's sort of soul with a reggae heart in the way that you sing and you deliver these songs. When I say crooner, I throw you back to the categories of guys like Elvis when they were at his most, soulful, I guess. Is that something that was intentional? And what came first? Was it a love of reggae, or was it a love of that 50s, 60s pop music that started you?
Well, it was more a love of the Jackson Five and Stevie Wonder, you know. Those were my first loves. Obviously, I grew up listening to the Beatles, you know, and I was aware of Elvis, but a little bit too young for Elvis. But I grew up listening to the Beatles in my very early years, and then by the time I was at secondary school, I was listening to the Jackson Five. You know, Michael was my hero. And I used to, sing for my friends in the playground all the Michael Jackson hits. Before my balls dropped, I could hit all of those notes. Got to be there, ain't no sunshine, and all that stuff. So I loved the Jackson Five, and that was the first big concert I went to in Birmingham at the Odeon,
Oh
was to see
wow.
the Jackson Five, and that just changed my life. I was screaming as loud as the girls. It was fantastic. Um, and then the year after that, in 1975, I went to see Bob Marley and the Wailers at
Wow.
the same venue.
Mm.
And I mean, that solidified. I mean, I already loved reggae because I'd grown up in sort of downtown Birmingham, which was the wrong side of the tracks, if you like. It was the red light district of Birmingham, and what I did, was hang around cafes, and all the jukeboxes in the cafes all had reggae music, rock steady and reggae on them, So I'd grown up listening to Tony Tribe, who sang, Red Red Wine, and
Yeah.
Eric Donaldson singing Cherry O Baby, and Jimmy Cliff with Many Rivers to Cross. Those were all songs that I knew. I also used to hang around when I was about 11 years old. We'd go to the shebeens and the blues parties to really to get the rice and the juice at the end of the night that was left over from the curry goat that they used to sell. But doing that, I was exposed to reggae music. So I grew up listening to reggae as much as I did the Jackson Five. So I suppose that's where my influences came from.
For sure. And it's interesting to hear that, because I think when a lot of people, and certainly people that are in the rock world, tend to think of Birmingham, they think of the heavier side, your Black Sabbaths and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Did you get yourself immersed in any of that? Did any of that scene have an appeal to you at all, or?
No, that all went straight over my head, in the 70s when I grew up, when I was at school. It was, the sort of the glam rock thing was happening, Gary Glitter and David Bowie and Mark Bolan and all that. And I had absolutely no interest in that at all. I was into ostensibly black music. All my neighbours were West Indian, or Jamaican, or Indian. I actually grew up listening to a lot of Indian music as well. Muhammad Rafi, from the old movie soundtracks, Asha Bhosle and Lata Mangeshkar's sister. So I grew up listening to that as well, because that was the other type of music that was on the jukeboxes. But it wasn't as accessible, as reggae. So
Mm.
obviously I got into reggae more.
So going right back to the early days of UB40, I've read somewhere that Chrissy Hine from the Pretenders actually had a little bit to do with getting you guys signed, and was fairly influential in the early days. Is first of all, is that true, and how did that relationship fall?
Well, it's massively true. Auntie Chris, as we used to call her. She came to see us when we'd just started and we'd done about a dozen shows. We were still on the pub circuit, um, and we'd finally got out of Birmingham, and we were doing there was a little sort of rock circuit in London, in Camden, the Rock Garden and the Hope and Anchor and all those sort of little gigs. And Chrissy was number one in the charts with the Pretenders, with Brass in Pocket.
Yep.
And she was out looking for a support for her tour. And she came to see us at the Rock Garden when we played there to about 100 people, And she loved what she saw. And she came backstage and asked us, would we come and support her on a 35-date tour.
Wow.
And as we'd only played, a dozen gigs up till then, we went, well, of course, we'd love to. Um, and it was a 35-date tour of mostly sort of colleges. And we enjoyed that so much and we went down so well that straight after the tour with the Pretenders, we booked the same tour again and then did it with as UB40, headlining our own tour. And on that tour, we had our first single released, which went, into the top five, and we were away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it must have been a bit of a surreal sort of full circle moment when you sing "I Got You, Babe" with Chrissy all those years later, and it becomes a household song. I mean, a song that's known by every generation now. Do you still stay in touch with Chrissy?
Yes, off and on. She'll have me as a guest at the big show. If she's doing a big show, um, I'll come on and do I Got You, Babe with her, or Breakfast in Bed.
Mm.
But I don't see her as often as I'd like. She spends most of her time in stateside. But she's still out there doing her thing, touring, and she's great. And we do owe, more or less, we owe everything to Chrissy Hine, really.
Mm. Mm.
She's the one that discovered us, if you
Yeah,
like.
yeah, for sure. So you left the original lineup of UB40 back in 2008. Um,
Yep.
and obviously there's all sorts of stories floating around about mismanagement and a little bit of internal conflict. How hard was it to step away from the original lineup? I guess the home base that was UB40 back then.
Well, it was very difficult. It wasn't something I wanted to do. Um, Basically, quite simply, I'd made a solo album called Big Love uh, back in the 90s or whatever. Um, and it was like the great reggae swindle, if you like. I got a lot of money, um, non-recoupable and tax-free. And um, when we released the album, they said, right, will you go out and promote it? And I went, well, no. I said, you've released it, you promote it. um, so the record company weren't very happy about that. But I didn't have any intention of leaving the band or anything. So the rest of the band were all saying to me, you're crazy, go out and promote the album. And I was going, well, no, I never intended to. I made the solo album out of tracks that I had hanging around in the studio anyway, because we had our own studios. And I said, I've put it together. I've got what I wanted out of it, which was a big advance, and non-recoupable and tax-free. So hey ho, it was all good. So I didn't promote it, and that was the end of that. And then later on in my career, I did a second solo album called Running Free. Um, and by then, UB40 hadn't really had a chart hit for sort of 15 years, not a top 20. And Running Free went in at number 9. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to promote this one. So I went to the guys and I said, I'd already checked with our agent to make sure that we had a month free. Um, And he said we did. So I wanted to take that month to promote the album, my second solo album. And I went to the band, and they said no. They refused to let me have the month off that I wanted. And I think there was a lot of jealousy there, and the management were already at it. And when I resigned, finally, I resigned because of that. I went, you can't stop me going and promoting my album. So I gave in a letter, and it started with, I don't trust the management. I don't trust the people who are managing us. And these are my reasons for, leaving. And that was the end of that. So I left. And since then, there's been all sorts of stories and nonsense sprouted. But that's the initial reason why I left. Um, and I've been with my band now for 20 years, and we're enjoying the same success as I did with the original band.
Yeah, for sure. And to know that you had a couple of members come and join you as well. Obviously, the late Astro was a
Yep.
huge part of what you're doing as UB40 featuring Ali Campbell.
Yeah,
Um,
well, he was disappointed with the management as well, and he finally agreed with me and came over to my band, and Mickey Virtue left when I
yeah,
left, keyboard player.
yeah,
Um, so that's why we became UB40 featuring Ali Campbell, Ali and Astro, and Ali Astro and Mickey at first,
yeah.
and then it became featuring Ali and Astro, and then Astro passed away, um, and now it's UB40 featuring Ali Campbell. Um,
Sure, for
we've
sure.
been
And I
going
mean,
for 20 years, and I'd say we've got the best reggae band in the world.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was probably one of my next questions. Tell me a little bit about the band and the guys that you've got in the band. Obviously, not having Mickey and Astro there with you. Who have you got there? I heard you've had guys from Fun Loving Criminals in the lineups over the years, and so who's with you
Yeah,
now, and who will
he's
be in
he's
Australia?
he's the latest addition, Frank. After Astro died, Frank Bambini from the Fun Loving Criminals, who was a friend of mine, who I'd done a version of Purple Rain with because he was a Prince fanatic. Um, he kind of stepped up and said, would you like me to be your G man? Or on stage, and I went, sure, Frank. I'd love that actually because I was in a bit of a low after Astro passed. Um, and Frank took on the mantle, and he's been with us off and on ever since. He still plays with the Fun Loving Criminals as their drummer, and when he's on stage with us, he's our percussionist and G-man,
Yeah.
if you like. But the rest of the band, they've been with me for, like I said, 20 years more or less,
Mm.
and that's Paul Slowly on drums, who's um, just a really respected drummer. They're all respected in the reggae world, basically all the players. Um, they're mostly West Indian or Jamaican. I've got uh, Colin McNeish on bass, who's played with everybody from Carol Thompson and all the people like that.
Yeah.
I've got Michael Martin on keyboards, who's been with me from the off, and who, in fact, I took the original UB40 when we did a tour of Europe, and we tried to do a reggae package with Burning Spear, Toots and the Maytals, and a band called African Star, which didn't do very well at the time. But there was an 18-year-old keyboard player with Burning Spear, and that was Michael Martin, who's the keyboard player with us now. So I've known him that long. Um, and I've got, we've had different brass people all along, but we've got Colin Graham, the trumpeter, who's been with us for 20 years. We've got Adj on saxophone, who's brilliant. Um, he's played with everybody and still does. So they're session players who are my band basically, and when I'm not on the road with them and they're not with me recording and stuff, then they play with other people, because they are, um, they're well loved in their genres, if you like, which is reggae mostly.
Mm, for sure. When you talk about, the show is a celebration of the UB40 hits, you also mentioned that there are no new tracks. Is that something that you are against sort of doing? Are you against writing new UB40 music, or is it because, as you say, you've got this great bunch of session musos that you tour with, that you don't have like a solid writing base with the team? Would that be it, or is it for different
Oh
reasons?
no, I've written stuff, and continue to do new stuff. Um, I've got stuff now that I'd love to release, but that's really down to Universal, who really in the last sort of 5 years have wound everything down, So they're not interested in releasing anything. I've got some great new stuff that I did with Bitty McLean. I've done who he started off as an engineer at our studios, and then we made a demo actually, and then we went off on tour, and we came back, and he was number two in the charts with with the song that we demoed originally, that he'd redone,
Yeah.
So we love Bitty, and he does do a lot of live work with me. I've got new stuff with him. I've done a great single with Idris Elba, who the actor who we know as his acting voice is lovely, but his singing voice is even better. And he wrote a song that I duet on. I did a duet with Samantha Morton, from Game of Thrones. Um, there's still lots of stuff that I'm doing and that I've done, but it's difficult to get it released now because there is no sort of department at Universal that releases music. It's all about downloads and stuff that I don't understand basically. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I could make an album in a heartbeat,
Mm,
and I'd use
sure.
I'd use my musicians, definitely.
For sure. And I mean, just going back to the tour, obviously it's a celebration of the hits. What do you personally, feel and get back from being on stage from an audience?
It's a big love thing, It truly is, Like I said earlier, reggae music is very unifying, and it's also a dance music, so it's a joyous occasion. Um, and we get more or less the same response everywhere we play in the world, and that includes Africa and Asia, America, Australasia, everywhere we get more or less the same reaction. And it's a beautiful thing, and I'll continue to do it as long as I can, because it is lovely, it is lovely to bring people together, and the fact that everyone's, smiling and singing along and all that, it's very heartwarming, and it is a big love thing for me, it's real.
Mm. And I guess through your career, you've played it all. You've played clubs, theatres, arenas, stadiums. Is there a particular setting that you prefer to perform in? I know some artists go, I love playing a club because I can actually see the crowd in front of me, or I can see the first 5 rows or the first 10 rows. But whereas other artists say the energy I get back from the audience in a stadium or an arena is what drives them as well. Do you have a personal preference, or is it a bit of best of both worlds for you?
It's everything. I mean, I love playing festivals because you know that you're getting people that wouldn't necessarily come and see you, ordinarily. Um, so that feels very inclusive. But recently we did some um, Christmas shows last year, up close and personal, they were called, and we were playing the Hammersmith Apollo in London, which is about 7,000 people, and it was lovely to get back to little theatres, like that. and we played was it Wolverhampton Civic Hall, and places like about 5,000, which is kind of intimate now. I never liked playing the Royal Albert Hall because that was too intimate because of the way that it's built. It's sort of everyone's sort of on a slope in
Yeah.
front of you. I didn't like that. I felt exposed. But you know, they're fine to play. I love playing festivals. And stadiums can be a bit strange because the sound is usually difficult to get a good sound, especially with us because we're very bass oriented. So yeah, we'll play everywhere. We will drop of a hat.
That's excellent. That's so good. And I love the fact that you have such a strong love for Australia and your fans out here. Before we wrap it up, I do have a couple of questions for you that are slightly off to the side. The first one being, what's the one thing you can't be on the road without?
Um, my band. My band.
Yeah,
That's the most important thing that's surrounding me.
yeah,
I don't do shows on my own. I know people that do. You've got people that branch out, like Roger Daltrey. For instance, he'll go out and do solo shows away from the Who, and Paul McCartney and people like that. But no, I like being with my band, and I've never thought of doing anything solo as it happens.
Mm. And I guess the next question is, what new music are you listening to?
I generally try and stay up with new reggae. Reggae's what I'm into. So I'll be listening to what's present day reggae. I listen every day to old reggae on the radio station. That's sort of the reggae that I grew up listening to. But I love listening to new stuff as well, and I like to see the progress that's being made with with dub and with drum and bass, and the mix with it. It's strange because hip hop evolved out of reggae, and then reggae sort of gone back into hip hop, because of the young kids. Basically, they love listening to American hip hop, so they've sort of dived into that. So there's a mix. There's a hip hop mix up, as they say. Yeah. So that's all very interesting. Yeah.
Fantastic. So obviously the UB40 featuring Ali Campbell tour, the Big Love Australia 2026 tour starts in Perth and I think winds up in Queensland with two shows. New show's just been announced for Brisbane.
Yeah.
Uh,
We're all over.
all over. It's fantastic. It's great to see you sharing the love countrywide, and I'm sure that fans will be flocking to this one. I would love to thank you again for your time today, Ali. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. There is so much more that we could deep dive into, but it's sort of hard to compact 45 years and probably a million stories into under half an hour. But I'd like to thank you for your time again, and thank you for joining us here at the Rockpit.
Okay. Big love, everybody out there in Australia, and see you all soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ali, and we'll see you in January.
Yep. Respect.